Joining me now is the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles. Michael, is George Soros the most impactful activist in the US?
He's certainly the most visible leftist activist, and he has disproportionate influence not only because of all the money that he invests in tearing our country down and advancing leftism, but because he's very smart and he's very clever at it. So while everyone is paying attention to the presidential race, for instance, Soros is investing money in lower level races, notably in the DAs, who then let criminals off of the hook and turn our cities into chaos. And his influence has been the stuff of legends. I mean, truly, it will be studied for decades to come. And now you're seeing the latest episode of this in that the Soros network is funding the anti-Israel and downright anti-Jewish protests all over the Ivy League and other university campuses, which I think throws a wrench in some of the machinations of the protesters, because if their argument is that the State of Israel and the Jews broadly are, controlling the world and perpetrating all manner of evil, they'll probably have to explain why they themselves are receiving a paycheck rather from one of the most prominent Jews on earth.
Now, President Biden has been characteristically weak and incoherent with his approach on this issue. Let's have a listen to what he's had to say.
Do you condemn the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses?
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians and how they're being.
Should the Columbia University president resign?
Right this way. I didn't know that. I'll have to find out more about it.
Hard to figure out what he's saying. I think he said he also condemns those who don't know about the plight of Palestinians. And he'll find out more about what's happening at Columbia University. Michael, here is a treat, a blast from the past. Contrast Biden's inept performance with the great Ronald Reagan.
Those people told you for days in advance that if the university sought to go ahead with that construction, they were going to physically destroy the university. Now, why did you
negotiate many times?
Negotiate? What is to negotiate? What is?
The university is a public institution.
That's right. But the university,
its own community, and for the community of Berkeley that live around it.
All of it began the first time some of you who know better and are old enough to know better let young people think that they had the right to choose the laws they would obey as long as they were doing it in the name of social protest.
Now, that's how you deal with trouble at university campuses. That is a president with moral clarity, full control of his faculties. Quite a contrast there, Michael.
I think so. The only thing that Ronald Reagan and Joe Biden had in common is they were both relatively elderly presidents. The problem is that mentally and spiritually, Ronald Reagan was always a vigorous young man and a fighter, and Joe Biden seems to be 150 years old and seems to be confusing all the various U.S. grand strategies from that period, probably going back to the colonial days. This is the fundamental problem with the Biden strategy. When he says, I condemn both sides, I support both sides, I'm a friend to all and a friend to none. Well, what is that going to get you? In real dollars and cents terms, Joe Biden has funded both sides of the conflict. With one hand, he gives money to the State of Israel. With another hand, he gives money to Iran. And so when Iran attacked the State of Israel the other day, Joe Biden could claim credit for funding all of the missiles and the anti-missile defenses there. Not a very smart policy, but he has no idea where he's going. And so when President Trump comes in and points to Joe Biden and points to his many failures, Donald Trump can say with a lot of credibility that if he were president, none of this would be happening, because President Trump was already the president, and during that time, mirabile dictu, amazing to say, he brought peace to the Middle East, he signed the Abraham Accords, Vladimir Putin stopped invading countries for the first time in 20 years, even Kim Jong-un started playing ball with the United States, and in just a short period of less than 4 years, Joe Biden has been able to wreak all sorts of havoc and undo so many of those great accomplishments. It would be impressive if it weren't so sad.
It would be impressive if it wasn't such a tragedy for the country and for the world. We've learnt a lot about the Biden family's dodgy business dealings, but a lot of the focus is on Hunter Biden, understandably so, the president's coke-addled whore enthusiast son. But it is Joe Biden, I've always argued, who is the product. He's the product the family is selling. It's his access, his influence, his name that has real market value. And the New York Post reports today that James Biden, the president's brother, made a flawless pitch for Qatar to invest $30 million in a troubled rural health provider. And he listed brother of Joe Biden as one of his credentials. They're not even being subtle about it, Michael.
I think Hunter Biden himself admitted this some years ago. He said, my last name is always going to be an entree into business. It's always going to have something to do with my success. I don't think that when Hunter Biden was sitting on the board of Burisma, it was because of his expertise in natural gas or Ukrainian politics. Something tells me it's because his father was the vice president and the point man. So this has been true not just for Hunter, but also for Joe Biden's brothers. It's a firm, it's a family firm, because Joe Biden, even Joe Biden, who's the leader of the pack, was never the brightest bulb in the pack. He had a pretty dismal academic record that he then lied about, which is why he had to drop out of the 1988 presidential race. But the man is dogged. He's determined, if nothing else. So he became president some decades later. And it's the only way that the Biden family's been able to make a lot of money. As you point out in your beautiful Australian diction, they have some expensive tastes, notably for the booger sugar and for ladies of the night. So they kept the money flowing, and now, only decades later, is it causing political headaches for Joe Biden, who probably will never face any legal or even political consequences for it.
Let's talk about billionaire Elon Musk and his battle with the Australian government. He wants them to stop censoring posts on his site X. We've got an e-safety commissioner in this country who's a leftist activist, appointed by a conservative government, but never mind, a leftist activist. And she wants what she considers harmful posts banned, not just in Australia. She wants them banned worldwide. This is making news in the US. What's the reaction there, Michael? How is Australia being perceived?
This was a story that I first blew the whistle on over a year ago, and a lot of people didn't pay attention at the time. In fact, Rita, you were one of the few people that was paying attention to this story at the time, probably because you had a little bit more insight generally, and you were so close to the epicenter of this major shockwave in global communication. This American who worked at Twitter in the pre-Elon days, who was constantly trying to have big tech censor independent voices, made it all the way over to your country, and from her position in the government, teamed up with the World Economic Forum and tried to implement new censorship. So one might say that a country has a right to install whatever kind of censorship regime it wants. We have probably more of a free speech tradition in the United States, but other countries do their own thing. Where the problems begin is when those countries and those international, unaccountable, liberal, globalist institutions like the World Economic Forum want to start censoring everybody else's country. And that is exactly what the E-Safety Commissioner in Australia, Julie Grant, as well as other members of the Australian government, all the way up to and including the Prime Minister, I'm sorry to say a man with an Italian last name, Albanese, even he is trying to push this kind of stuff. And so they're trying to fine people $500,000 a day. They're trying to fine X for reporting on the stabbing in Sydney, the mall stabbing, and then the stabbing of the Ancient Church of the East Bishop. They're trying to shut down independent global magazines like Redux, which is not an Australian publication. It's an international publication. It has writers in the United States for reporting on stories that are of public interest, trying to shut down independent journalists for reporting on stories of, for instance, a trans-identifying radical activist who has published all sorts of obscene and downright criminal material, now sitting on a UN panel to determine gender-affirming care. This is obviously a matter of public interest, but I think that the liberal globalists know that the people don't like this stuff. They don't like this being forced down their throats. They don't like not having any say or any vote in it. And so the answer is that they're going to censor everybody, no matter the jurisdiction and no matter national borders.